The most recognizable comedian in America almost didn't go on stage that night because the only color he wanted to wear didn't exist anywhere in his own wardrobe rack. And the 26-year-old wardrobe assistant who solved the problem in 9 minutes flat says that single decision is the reason the rest of the world remembers George Carlin the way it does. June 27, 1992, the Paramount Theatre, Madison Square Garden, New York City. 90 minutes before HBO's cameras rolled on what would become Jammin' in New York. Her name was Angela Cho. She was not funny, not famous, and not, by her own account, particularly interested in comedy. She pressed shirts for a living. That night, she pressed the wrong ones. To understand why a shirt almost stopped George Carlin cold, you have to go back to who he'd always been on stage, and who he'd quietly decided, backstage, alone, with a legal pad on his knee, he could no longer be. Angela had been doing wardrobe for touring specials for 3 years by 1992, and Carlin's rack was always the easiest one on her list. Loud printed button-downs, cardigans in mustard and rust, the occasional paisley, a little loud, a little goofy. Exactly what you'd expect from a guy who used to do the weather on the radio in a funny voice. It was the uniform of the everyman, approachable, warm, a little rumpled. The same palette he'd worn since the 70s, since the beard and the ponytail had softened his edges instead of sharpening them, since the hippy-dippy weatherman stopped being a bit and started being half of who people thought he actually was. She had 6 shirts steamed and hung by 6:30. Blue check, tan cardigan. The green one his manager, Jerry Hamza, always said, "Read well," under HBO's stage lights. She'd worked 3 of his television tapings already that year, and could have hung that rack blind. Carlin arrived at 7, alone, carrying a legal pad instead of a garment bag. That was the first thing that felt wrong. He never came in without Hamza trailing a step behind, talking through the run of show. Tonight it was just him, quiet, moving slowly past the mirrors like he was walking into a room he didn't fully recognize. He looked at the rack the way a man looks into a stranger's closet. He touched the sleeve of the green shirt once, the way you'd touch something you used to own, and let it fall back against the others. "None of these," he said. Angela laughed, assuming it was a joke. He did that sometimes. Deadpanned a complaint into the room just to watch people's faces. Carlin didn't laugh back. That was the second sign. "I need something else tonight," he said. "I need black." "Black," Angela repeated. "Like a black version of the cardigan? I can call down and see if wardrobe stock has." "No cardigan." He set the legal pad down on the counter, flat, like he was done arguing with it, too. "No pattern, no color, just black. All of it. Shirt, jacket, everything above the belt." She pulled the tour binder out of habit, the one HBO's people had put together after his last 2 specials. Every note in it, continuity photos, 3 specials worth of stills, said the same thing. Colorful, warm, recognizable. The brand. The guy you'd let into your living room because he still looked, underneath everything, like your neighbor. "This isn't in here," she said, tapping the binder. "I know." He sat down on an equipment case, the legal pad back on his knees. And for a second he wasn't performing anything, not the deadpan, not the calm. "The material tonight is different, Angela. It's not the weatherman stuff. It's the Gulf. It's what's actually happening in this country, instead of what people wish was happening. He stopped himself, exhaled. It's darker, and I can't say dark things standing up there in a cardigan. Cardigan tells the audience, relax, I'm still the funny guy from the radio. I need to look like exactly what I'm about to sound like before I say one word. She checked her watch. 68 minutes to curtain, and George Carlin's entire stage identity, 3 specials, a decade and a half of continuity photos, did not include a single black garment. She started with the obvious and burned through it in 11 minutes flat. The wardrobe truck. Nothing solid black in his size, only a navy sport coat 2 sizes too big. The merchandise table. Black tour t-shirts, but silk-screened with his own face across the chest. Unusable. And he actually laughed once, short and dry, when she suggested it anyway. Crew wardrobe. A stagehand's spare black button-down, a size too large, sleeves that would hang past his wrists under the lights. 40 minutes to curtain. Angela stood in the wardrobe closet holding the only candidate she had left and her own sewing kit, the one she carried out of habit, not expectation, the one that had sat unused in her bag for 2 tapings straight. She pinned the back flat, 3 inches of extra fabric folded under and stitched down the seam so it wouldn't billow when he moved. Her hands weren't steady, not from nerves about Carlin himself, from the math. 9 minutes to hem a sleeve by hand. 4 minutes to press it so the crease wouldn't catch the light wrong. 2 minutes to walk it back down the hall to a man who did not like waiting for anything, least of all himself. Somewhere in those 40 minutes, Jerry Hamza found her in the hallway, asked what she was doing with a stagehand's shirt and a needle, and she told him the truth. George wants black. There isn't any. I'm making some. Hamza didn't argue. He looked at her like a man deciding whether to trust an amateur with something that mattered, then said, "Make it fast," and walked away to hold off the stage manager for 5 more minutes than the schedule allowed. 22 minutes to curtain, she knocked on his dressing room door with a shirt that wasn't his, altered by a stranger's hands, still faintly warm from the iron. "It's not perfect," she said. Carlin held it up to the light, turned it over once, checking the seam she'd rushed. Put it on without another word. "It's black," he said, buttoning the cuff himself since the sleeve was still a half-inch long. "That's the part that has to be perfect." He walked to the wings at 8:04, wearing a borrowed black shirt under a black jacket that was his own, a blazer he already owned, it turned out, and had never once worn on stage. Angela watched from the curtain line with the rest of the crew, the way she watched every night, except this time she was holding her breath for a reason nobody else in the building understood. The house lights dropped, and for 3 full seconds, nothing happened. No walk-on cue landed the way it always did. Carlin just stood there in the dark, in a color the audience had never once associated with him, and 18 years of a warm, familiar silhouette simply weren't standing on that stage anymore. Somebody in the front rows laughed first, a nervous, uncertain laugh, the kind that comes from not knowing yet what you're looking at. That's when it happened. Carlin didn't open with a joke. He opened with a pause, long enough that Angela counted it out of habit, the same way she counted hymns. 4 seconds. 5. Then he said the first line of the special, flat and quiet, no wink in it at all. And the laugh that came back wasn't the easy laugh the cardigan used to get. It was sharper. It arrived a half-beat late, like the room was still catching up to who it was actually looking at. Not one row, not the front section, the whole house, adjusting in real time. Backstage, the show ran 94 minutes, and by the time Carlin walked off, Angela had almost stopped thinking about the shirt at all, until he stopped in front of her, still wearing it, sweat visible now against the black in a way it had never shown against the prints and the cardigans. "You saved that," he said. It wasn't a question. "I just found a shirt," she said. "No." He shook his head. "You found the shirt. There's a difference." He looked down at the sleeve she'd pinned an hour earlier, the seam holding, the crease still sharp. "This is what I look like now. I just didn't know it until tonight." He didn't say thank you the way people usually mean it. He said it the way he delivered a line he'd been sitting with for years and had finally gotten right. Once. Quietly. Like he meant to say it that way forever and didn't need to say it twice. Angela went home that night and didn't think much more about it. She had 4 more shirts to press for the next tour stop, and nobody hands out credit in wardrobe. That's not a complaint, it's just the job. Nobody did hand out credit, not for years. Not until a researcher, cataloging Carlin's stage wardrobe for an archive, tracked her down, by then in her 50s, and asked what she remembered about June of 1992. "I remember there wasn't a black shirt on that rack," she told him. "And I remember there was one on every single rack after that, for the rest of his life." She was right, and the tape proves it. From Jammin' in New York forward, through Back in Town in 1996, You Are All Diseased in 1999, Complaints and Grievances in 2001, Life is Worth Losing in 2005, all the way to his final HBO special in 2008, The Cardigans Never Came Back. Black jacket, black shirt. No pattern, no color. Exactly the man he'd told Angela he needed to look like, with 68 minutes on the clock. Reviewers started writing about it without knowing why. The elder statesman of American anger, one critic called him, dressed like a man who's done apologizing for what he's about to say. He had been. Since June 27, 1992. Kelly Carlin, his daughter, said something similar years later in an interview about her father's later work. People think the anger came first, and the look followed it. It was the other way around. He dressed like the man he was about to become, and then he had to live up to the outfit. She wasn't in the building that night. She didn't need to be. She'd watched the same black shirt walk through her childhood living room for the next 16 years, and never once asked where it came from. Today, the shirt itself doesn't survive. Wardrobe pieces from a single taping rarely do, and nobody in 1992 thought to keep a stagehand's borrowed button-down. But the photographs do, hundreds of them, and every one after that June night shows the same silhouette. A man in solid black, standing still before he says a word. Carlin's personal archive, donated by his daughter Kelly Carlin, now sits at the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York, a few hours from where he grew up on the streets of Manhattan. Visitors who walk through it move from the early photographs, bright shirts, a wide grin, the weatherman everybody remembers from black and white television, into the later ones, where the color simply stops and doesn't come back. Museum staff say it's the transition guests notice first, before they've even read a single placard explaining why. a rack's worth of color on one wall, and then, starting the summer of 1992, nothing but black for the rest of the hallway. Angela Cho still tells the story the same way, decades later. Not as a wardrobe emergency, but as the night she watched a man decide, with less than an hour to spare, that he could no longer perform in a costume that disagreed with what he had to say. 68 minutes, then 40, then 22. Every number smaller than the last, and at the end of all of them, one plain black shirt that outlasted every colorful one he'd ever owned. Not because it fit better, but because for the first time, it told the truth before he opened his mouth. That's the part people forget when they remember George Carlin as the man who said the words nobody else would say. Before he could say a single one of them that night, he had to look like a man capable of saying them. Angela Cho didn't write a line of the show. She didn't tell a single joke. She just made sure, with 9 minutes and a borrowed sewing kit, that the truth had something honest to wear. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. It helps keep these forgotten stories alive. And tell us in the comments, has a small, last-minute fix you made ever ended up changing the whole night for someone else?